How you doing, Keith?
Doing well, much better than I deserve.
You've been down south, hadn't you? But you were in Sudan. When did you get back?
Sunday.
Sunday. Well, very good. Good to have you back.
Yeah, thanks. It was a great trip.
You were working on some projects down there.
Yeah, market assessment, just seeing how best to help the situation. We got a few projects going on there and down there helping the teams gather some data.
In a forested area, or you don't get a chance to run a saw down there, huh?
No, not in that environment.
But, I don't know who's going to join in tonight, but I put together a video. I had a message came from Doug Puerto. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he was a retired head of the forestry department for Cal Poly University out in San Luis Obispo, California. I had worked with Doug and some of the students over the years at the Swanton Ranch, and we did some work out in the Redwood area and some different things several years ago. Doug's retired. He's been retired now for I don't know, probably 5, 6 years. I lose track of time. He's got a place up in Wisconsin. I guess it's Wisconsin because he's got one of those cheesehead things, I think. But he wrote a piece that was pretty cool. And he checks in on me since I had the issues being kind of under the weather health wise. He sent a message the other day that had four points on it. I thought was pretty cool and got me to thinking. Number one was essential learning occurs in the classroom that then must be applied by the student in forest situations using specific forestry equipment and techniques. He was talking about that this was things that he considered over his time of being good instruction for and mostly relating to forestry, but quite a bit to chainsaw operation. Number two thing was students would be closely supervised as they complete each competitive graded field exercise. Three, students who have completed instructions learned by doing classes all commit that instructor classes are awesome. In other words, it's classes that are hands-on, and you learn by doing stuff out there with the students, and basically the students are excited. They think that they're getting something out of it. Then looking at overall, a good program usually ends up with congratulations on outstanding teaching and an outstanding career. That's what we all strive to do as we're trying to teach people things. Is looking at being able to thanked for what we've tried to achieve over the years. And so I thought that was pretty cool of him to send that in and kind of go over some of that. And it got me thinking about it. An instructor has to have a plan and a specific program, and then not just watch and imitate. The students wouldn't just watch them and then imitate. And I see that a lot in a lot of business settings. An instructor would create a thinking and planning process to raise the skill level of the participants and the group, if there is one, in safety as well as maintaining or building productivity. The thing that I got to really thinking about is trying to, as we've talked about in some of our legacy programs, Keith, as you've been part of, is trying to get people up to a certain level. And to be able to do that is to try to have a program that's basic, but yet covers necessary needed things that help people to start building their own planning process. And I thought that's kind of a hard thing to do sometimes when it comes down to it. But I've got a few things here of some things to consider when committing to a training workshop, because when I started to look at, as I said at the beginning, a training participant focus. In other words, what does someone think about when they are going to a training class, or maybe their boss sent them to it, or maybe in your case you've worked with a lot of volunteers over the years on different storm sites and things, and to be able to to kind of consider what would be important areas that need to be covered. We talked about, different training things and all with step by step, but what are some things to consider when committing to a training workshop? In other words, what does a participant really need to consider? And I got to thinking there's so many different types of participants that we start with. You agree with that?
Yeah,
So
yeah, for sure.
when you think about trying to build a program that's level, for a lot of different skill levels as well as applications, what are some things to think about? And one of them is, a lot of times in the classes, you get people who've just become a chainsaw owner, or you could say operator at that time. It might be somebody with no real time on the handles of a chainsaw, and definitely not with any maintenance or that kind of an area. But I got to thinking it's not only that we think immediately about somebody firewood or something like that, but it could be a new person on a crew, whether it be logging or tree care or disaster group or whatever. That could be somebody that's new to that operation, and even though they've got quite a number of hours of experience in it, when you go to a new operation of any type, you got to kind of back up and think about what level are they on. That's something to me that's kind of tough sometimes to look at and to figure out where do I start? Do I just start answering questions, or do I take and I start going through basics that are required, really at some point in time with the chainsaw operation? So if any of y'all have any ideas out there, if you'd send in any questions or your thoughts on that, or I've got the ability now, if you like, passcode and all for the Zoom meeting. There we go. So that's to join in on the meeting. You can do that if you got Zoom on your phone or computer. That's something that if we think about that, Keith, how do you consider going about that? When you've got a mixed group where you've got somebody that's new to a site.
I think you can start by quizzing them and asking them, "What have you done with a chainsaw before?" And "Oh, I've fallen trees all over the place," or "I've just bought one and I've barely run it." Hear the experiences, and then I think it's one of those good experiences versus bad experiences, and I would immediately, of course, go to the safety aspect and say, um, have you secured all the necessary protective equipment, and is that a practice that you apply on every operation? Because that's kind of the first step. Doesn't really matter how good you are and how good the saw is, if if you're not using the safety gear and you don't have a mindset for safety to begin with, then that's the first thing you got to start with. And so that's kind of like module one, and just PPE, and say, how many of you wear it every single day? And if 9 hands go up out of 10, then guess what? That 10th person needs to hear, that information. It's new to them. And so maybe along the way, the other folks will, you'll reiterate the importance and help them to understand that, there are limitations. That's something that I always see when I go to tree workshops or festivals. There's usually a gear check, and you'd be amazed at how many people are climbing on saddles that are 15, 20 years old, and how many of their helmets are 8 or 10 years old. And it's one of those, there are some gray areas, but if you've got a piece of gear that's more than 10 years old, doesn't really matter if it's life support or if it involves your safety. It needs to be cycled out. That's just an industry standard. And so, switching back over to what do we know? Why would people say this? They say it because there are standards. Well, where do those standards come from? They come from real life experiences, just like you've had. And so, if you could circle and kind of pull that back in, I think that would help them focus and understand that, the safety is first and foremost, and you got to use the gear, but you got to let the gear do its job, and hopefully you never have to find out whether those chaps work well or not. But if you do, then they're certainly not going to work sitting in the back seat of the truck, as opposed to being on your legs. So that's where I would begin.
Like you say, it can't work unless you got it right. You got to be able to use it, and if it's too old, you don't want it to break. So there has to be some type of an inspection that goes on and stuff. What do you think? Let's say that somebody storm shows up at a volunteer situation on a storm cleanup. In other words, you got a work site there that you as an instructor or as an organizer are kind of responsible for, and if you think about it from an aspect, I know you've talked to hundreds of people that way. What are some of the thoughts out there? Are they really open to picking up on the information of, like you said, if they've never used chaps or protective apparel, or maybe they've got a different type of chainsaw or whatever it might be? What's their thought process? If we kind of get into the mode of the participant there.
Most of them are they're there to help. The reason they came was to help folks out, and so in our presentations, at least when I would do it, and I think most of my colleagues that still do that, and I know Chris does it with every single orientation that he puts on. You don't give people an option. You just tell them, if you're going to be running a saw, you're going to be wearing the safety gear. So you kind of remove the option from the very beginning. But it's more than just voluntold and telling them they have to. You kind of explain it. Well, we last thing we want to have happen is to contribute to the injuries that are reported for this storm. And there's a lot of people who got hurt when that wall fell on them or that tree hit their car, and we don't want you to be another part of the statistics. So it's one of those things where you kind of try your best to let them know how much you care about them, how much we care about the people we're going to go help, and that there is a bigger picture here. It's more than just what your individual mode of operation is. There are other people involved, and when it comes to an organization, especially as big as Samaritan's Purse, it's simply a liability. We want to keep you safe, because we've got a reputation to uphold, and it's our job. If you're willing to come help us, it's our job to keep you safe as much as we can, and the only way that we can do that is to assure in every way we can that you're given the opportunity to operate in a safe environment. But that begins with you having the right attitude. And so we've had people who we've gone and talked to on a site that are, doing something that's less than safe, or it's something they've always done before for 20 years. And I distinctly remember a gentleman in Noonan, Georgia, who was having trouble with a saw, and it was almost like there were two conversations going on. And we said, it looks like there's some trouble here. Can we help you with that? I've been running a saw for 20 years. And it's like, well, that's great. Thank you so much for bringing that skill, that experience to the table to help your neighbors here. But, we're trying to figure out how we can help you with this situation. The guy just was ornery. I mean, he just was so upset. Essentially took his toys and went home. They were going home at lunch anyway, and it was 12 o'clock. They were leaving at 12:30. He just put the saw down and walked away. I told the other staff member that was there, I said, I hate that the guy got offended by the fact that we're trying to keep him safe, but in my mind, it's a win if he's not willing to comply and do what he needs to do to operate that unit safely. And it was a 44, an 044 with a 25-inch bar. I mean, it's not it's not that any one saw or another saw is more dangerous than another, but with that kind of power, you got a lot more opportunity for kickback, especially in the circumstance that he was using the saw in. And so although it kind of hurt his feelings, at the end of the day, he went home safe and sound. And so it's just that comfortable medium. How do you balance upholding the law, the rules, the policy, with trying to, ensure that people know that they're cared for, and that we want to make sure they've got every opportunity to have a positive experience, but that has to go through those basics, those fundamentals of staying safe and safe operation with the saw, making sure the saw is good running order, that you've gone through your RDT module steps, and that the saw is safe to use. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
you just go from there.
Yeah, yeah. So, if you start to think about, I know of sometimes kind of putting it into a work business type aspect, is we have a lot of times people will hire somebody, and they've got some experience with the saw or whatever, but if they get on that operation, working with a different supervisor or different coworkers, or it might be even it's a different site, and that's what you get into when you get into storm stuff for sure. Everything has to be planned out separately because every storm situation is different. Well, every tree in a logging situation or a tree care situation is different also. So you start thinking through it, that person, no matter what type of experience they have, still has to kind of mold into that particular crew or that particular situation. So having the same training techniques, which are usually developed through teaching of an owner or a supervisor or coworker or whatever, to be able to take and kind of get an even playing field there is so important. There's so much to it that a lot of people don't really consider there, really. I got a thing here from Brian Wagner sent in. He said, "Hey Tim, not on Zoom, but I would like to comment on extreme heat and the training process. With temps in the mid 90s and muggy, things get tough on an educational basis. Dressed in all of the required PPE and working on steep terrain, sometimes the attention level may not be optimal. About the same thing when I was in the Northeast. Below zero temperatures could be a problem. Just some thoughts on whether or temperature can affect the learning process." He says, "Be good." I find that to be very true over the years. And in a lot of cases, a lot of the first training days are kind of demonstration, and everybody's kind of watching the instructor. But if it's 95 degrees out there, the instructor's sweating a good bit, and you get people trying to find a shady spot, and all of that. But there's a lot of wear and tear when it comes to somebody who's in a class, whether 8 or 10 people or one-on-one or whatever it is. There's so many times when the weather is an issue. And I know up where Brian came from before, he been up at Paul Smith's, and it would be 10, 11 degrees and 5 feet of snow, and we'd dig around the trees. And I'd go back for a follow-up in the fall, and we'd have 2-foot stumps out there because we thought that we had dug down to the bottom of the snow. And so it makes such a big difference, thinking about quality training and how it's handled. And the other thing is it takes time to do that. I mean, you've got to allot the time to be able to have a training program that's going to even out the experience load, but then it also takes time sometimes to be able to make it through different scenarios. And there's very few times, Brian could probably say a lot about this, is in the logwoods, which he did for years, is every tree is different. And you get out there, and then all of a sudden you've got a tree that you're pretty used to, and then you get on a site to where you've got 40-degree slopes. It makes a whole new world of planning process that goes on there.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next time is you got snakes, or you got this, that, and another. There's all kinds of issues that you get into. And so there's so many things to the training process that that people don't always recognize when it comes down to it, and that's something that's it's important when we put together those four steps that Dr. Doug was talking about there, because it really makes a difference to get people up to a level that need to be. It could be that also somebody is planning to start a tree business, tree care business or a logging business. And then you've got all of the things of equipment training that goes in there too. And I've seen this a lot with volunteer groups, but also city, county, and state. And then sometimes with a lot of the logging training that I've done over the years, the whole group would be virtually new employees. And yeah, they've run some saws all the way up through the years a little bit, but they really haven't been on logging crews. They might have been on right of way, or they might have cut a lot of firewood growing up, or whatever it is. But when you get out there and you start to put it into an application, the training requirements are pretty important, that you think through that. And that kind of goes back what you were saying about industry standards. Where do they come into play? Because we can learn so much from those, and there's a lot of people who don't consider them important. It's the time on the saw and how long you've been doing it and that kind of stuff that's going to make a difference. But a lot of times we pass up a lot of good information that's shared in training programs or in different requirements from insurance or from OSHA or ANSI standards, those kinds of things, that if we would make ourselves aware of them, that it's something that can save you a lot of time, and all of a sudden a light bulb comes on. And same thing I've always preached for years with operators manuals. I go into different things with groups that are, their task is to do a spring cleanup around a town or a city, and they've got 8 or 10 employees that work in the maintenance department, and they don't run chainsaws all year long. But when the spring hits and they've got a lot of drains to clear and roadways to clean, they have to start considering the basics to kind of go over, and refresh themselves. And they get out there and start working with it, and you have to think about how those basics of an operator's manual and those industry standards and those kinds of things can help us to refresh our skills in our planning processes, and that's what can really maintain the safety. So you take time if you need to. You can type slowly. What do you think, Keith? There's a lot to that, isn't there? Over the next 2 or 3 weeks, I've got about 5 or 6 different areas I'd like for us to kind of go down through. Go ahead.
I was just going to reiterate, it all starts with a plan. If it's the old cliche of failure to plan is a plan to fail. And it starts with your personal protective equipment. It also includes your conditions. Yeah, if you're in freezing temperatures, then you've got more than just your PPE to consider. You've got your apparel, and if you're in hot environments, if you're in windy environments, you really need to have an organizational alignment that everybody's on the same page. And I think that is one of the biggest trends that I'm so appreciative of, that we've adopted to a great degree, which is having that safety meeting on a daily basis. Because when you go to a new site, it's just like you say, every time you walk up to a tree, it's a new tree, it's a new scenario, and this tree may look identical to the previous tree, but you still need to go through all 5 steps of the felling plan to fall that tree. And so if you're going out to a new site, you need to go through all the steps of what's the coordination look like on this site? Who's doing what? Where's everybody going to be? And, building harmony so that everybody understands what the protocols are, what the plan is for the site, and what the plans are for each of those components of doing the work. And, communication and planning, I think those go so much further than anything else. And I'm really appreciative that pretty much you don't go to any workshop anywhere without them talking about a safety briefing at the beginning. And even in the workshops, they're practicing what they preach. And so in Morganton, South or North Carolina, about an hour south of us, there's a quarterly meeting there. Guys, it's very grassroots, but they come together, and there's a couple of folks that are really the proponents, the ones that put it together, and there's a sponsor that offers the property. And before every single activity, if it's aerial rescue, if it's safe chipper operation, if it's talking about planting basics, you're planting a tree for somebody. Every single workshop, every single module of those workshops, they do a safety briefing. And so if you're standing under a big 85, 90 foot, 40-inch DBH white oak that's still got some deadwood in it, they're like, everybody's got to have a hard hat on, and you got to be aware that if the wind picks up, we're going to move out from under this thing because we're not certain of what the status of that deadwood is up there. I've never seen one of those limbs come out, but it really, again, it begins with that planning process and being consistent and letting people know that they matter and that you're there to help the situation, not to make it worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's so true. It's everybody talks about we want to all go home, and it's so important that we stay in that training mode, no matter what type of work we're doing, especially with chainsaws. I've got one little thing that we'll kind of wrap it up for tonight. I've got a thing here on I got off of Instagram. I thought it was kind of interesting, but just to kind of get people kind of think through some stuff in the planning process. And you hear people talk about, well, we cut bigger trees or whatever. Well, this was a pretty large tree here, and they got a jack on it. Can you see it?
I can.
And so they got a neat little adapter thing they put on the jack, because if you don't have something on there to kind of even out, sometimes those regular jacks will kind of jump out. But as you start to look at this, he's got some wedges in there for security and stuff. He's jacking up on it. Had a little problem with the handle. If you look, he's jacked it almost an inch there. So, that tells me this tree is probably 36 inches, maybe 42 inches, somewhere through there. Looks like probably Douglas fir. But if this tree were 120 feet tall, how much backlean you think that tree had on it? If you jack it up, and he's got a good hinge on there, if you jack it up 1 inch, it's say a 3 foot into a 150 foot tree, let's say. What would that be? That'd be 50 segments, wouldn't it? So 1 inch lift would move 50 inches in the top, roughly. So that tree had 4 foot of backlean. So I guess that's the reason why they probably started to think about the hydraulic jack versus beating wedges. But then look at the lever bent and broke, which it could have been already cracked or something, I don't know. But watch when it goes over. What do you think the resistance is? That top moved a good bit. May have not had 4 feet of backlean. But when this goes over, it's kind of a quick look there. But
yeah,
you think the hinge was thick?
Can't really see it from my vantage point, but I believe, they probably were doing a lot of work they didn't need to do.
It could have been a thick hinge, or it could have been, if you think about 10% on a 36-inch tree would be about 3.5 inches. So it's probably pretty close. So I'm going to say they probably had 4 foot of backlean on that tree or better, didn't they?
How far in that jack? Where's it making contact with the tree? Like how much did they lose on their?
Well, you see, they got a like a boomerang looking thing.
Yeah,
that goes to the back of the tree, so the pressure's all the way back to the back there. So he's probably got at least 8 to 12 inches in on the face notch. Looks like from where the hinge is there. So, let's say you got 2.5 or 3 foot of lift area there to the hinge to the fulcrum. Hey, Michael Kelly checked in. Let's see. Hey, Michael Kelly. But I thought that's kind of interesting when you start to look at training and thinking about it. You come back and read a lot of results and start to look at this. Could it be done easier? I don't know. We don't know how much back lean it had, how much side lean it had, any of that kind of stuff. But we've got the ability to take a look at some of those things and look at if we were going to be in that kind of timber all day long, how much we need to think about productivity and still maintain the safety. So if we try to leave too much hinge, can be as big a problem sometimes as too small a hinge and losing direction.
Yeah.
Is the sun go down in Alabama, or are you down in Guatemala or something?
No, I just stepped outside, Tim. It was nice and cool here for a change, so I said I'm gonna go out and listen to you in the good cool of the evening.
Oh, I appreciate that. I hadn't talked to you in quite a while. You're looking good there, even in the dark.
Hey, man, I try.
We got Keith over here who's joined me with the Samaritan's Purse there, so we've been talking about everything. I guess you've been listening in a little bit. But,
Yeah, only thing I could add to that is, man, in storm season, and our guys leave here, and Tim, on the utility trucks, on the buckets, and the line trucks going to put wire up, and some of the stuff they see. Good people out there trying to help their neighbors, and boy, it just breaks your heart sometimes to see some of the stuff, the positions they put themselves in, and man, if it wasn't nothing but for the good Lord watching out over them, a lot of them wouldn't make it. But God bless them for trying to help. But yeah, our guys see it a lot, and I think Tim, due to your training and raising awareness, helping me over the years to learn from you and bringing this up in meetings, it's really made our guys back up and not just jump into something and go to cutting. Don't want to do that anymore. I think they've learned that, like you call it, wood under pressure.
mm-hmm.
When it starts moving, buddy, it's fast. So, but yeah, we're in the thick of the season here, so it's kind of quiet this week, but October it usually gets fired up, and so that usually puts our guys on the road chasing a hurricane and lots of trees. I guess y'all saw when Houston got hit, man, there was a ton of trees in that Metro Houston area that went down, and some of those old oaks hadn't been touched in decades.
Mm-hmm.
They've had some fairly good weather around Houston, and man, it created a mess for them. Centerpoint Energy, they had their hands full with that storm. It was tough.
Chris Childs has just been out there, and John also. They've been working in Texas for about a month with the other crews. So yeah, it's I guess what I was going to ask you,
Wow.
where they feel like they get something out of it. How important, from your standpoint, which you've worked at most of the major organizing to begin with, but you worked at a lot of the major power companies in Alabama and the Southeast. What's one of the biggest keys to trying to get everybody to a working level? To try to, when you start to think about, and I'm calling this training participants focus. How do you get somebody focused on training to where they like it?
Well, that's just it. As you've worked with our guys before here in the state, Tim, and you and I discussed this early on. We've got guys in the state that run chainsaws every day, and then we've got guys that pick chainsaws up and run them just for a brief period of time in their line of work. If they're a lineman, they may not run a chainsaw often, but our veg management guys, they're on the end of a saw every day, and so it's just like in any craft or any trade, enough work experiences, and I always say enough bad work experiences usually teaches us we need some help. We need to sit down with somebody who's done this many times before and listen to them, because it's again, in our industry, the guys that we hire today, as opposed to the guys who came in, and I'm even talking about myself. When I came to work at the co-op, I didn't have any experience running chainsaw. The proper experience, let me say that, being on a farm, picked up a saw, did what you were told. But a lot of our guys that we hired prior to my generation coming in, they had run chainsaws. So they're, as you know, Tim, you trained a lot of them. You could identify that. You saw it in them. When they put their hands on a saw, they knew what they were doing. And that just came from years of experience. But we just don't have that anymore. People just don't have that. And now we're running saws, it seems like, in some areas just out of necessity. But I do believe, Tim, you really have a lot of you and guys like you have really helped us turn the corner in raising that awareness to say, that is a piece of equipment. You do not want to just run out there and grab it and just go to, like cutting. You really have to know what you're doing. And I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate what you've done over the many years here in our state to help raise that awareness. And like we started out here with the program, the goal is to get the older guys proficient and train them with the information. Everything you taught, RDT, the skate routes, everything that we've always, hit on, have a good plan. Let those guys go back and train their guys daily and develop good work habits based on the training that you provided. And I can look back now and see that that's what happened. That was your goal coming in here. And I do believe you were successful. And it really, really did help our guys, to learn that, hey, like you said, all of these situations we find ourselves in, we have to have a plan. OSHA requires the guys who do electrical line work, on our standard, we have to start every job with a job briefing. So that helps us on the utility side. We have a list of things that we're going to run down, and we're going, we're checking boxes sometimes, but we're stopping long enough to look at the situation and give everybody a time to ask questions. So same way with tree felling. If you don't walk up to that tree and you don't have yourself a briefing, even if you're by yourself cutting, you've got to have that internal conversation. Say either, like you said, Tim, there's two options for cutting a tree. You can either cut her, you can walk away. That's your only two options, And so I'm thinking, here we've gotten that skill level to our guys to understand that sometimes you need to walk away and get somebody else in and put some more brain power on it.
Well, I appreciate it, and I know everybody in Alabama does too. They appreciate your commitment to training and all types. You guys have so much more than just chainsaws to mess with, but it's something where, like you say, you put the commitment in the guys that are supervising or they're key workers, and then it spreads. But you got to make the commitment to starting that step-by-step program to begin with, so that they get that basics down. That checklist you're talking about for the safety meeting, that's those basic things is what really makes it go, and that's what makes it start to spread with your other employees and with other groups. Let's see. Brian said, "Ha ha ha! 95 degrees. I may double a wedge, maybe a double and a shim, but if I can get the cutter or skidder to it, game over. 95 degrees makes an old guy sweat." Brian was an instructor up in New England, and then was through North Carolina forestry for years and years. And he's retired down in Florida, so he's down in hot weather now. John Chafin, how are you doing? I guess you got 2 or 3 days going off, I saw in your message. John's a logger up in West Virginia. He's got some steep terrain to mess with. Michael, I appreciate you dropping in, and you're welcome anytime. Thursday night saws, we're on every Thursday night at 8 o'clock, so if you get a chance to drop by and you'd enjoy. I know you've been going down to some different work with some different missions. You and Keith could spend hours talking about stuff like that. He just got back from South Africa. Oh, not South Africa, but Africa. So he's out and about. And like I say, 2 or 3 of the guys are working pretty hard in One of them was in Georgia this week, but he was in Texas for the past 2 weeks. So these guys are putting some time on chainsaws and trying to help a few people out. So,
Hey Tim, I shared this one with you a couple of weeks ago, and I know my church member that wouldn't mind me saying this. He got a call one night from his wife, and she was on a text asking us to pray for her husband. He had had an accident that afternoon, and Veronica started to tell me about it, and I heard two things come out of her mouth: chainsaw and a ladder. And
uh-oh.
I'm thinking to myself, "Oh, brother, what were you thinking?" And anyhow, so he fell off a ladder. It knocked him out, and son was right there with him and got him some good care and got him to the hospital, and everything's fine. But I offered the next morning, say, let me come over there that afternoon. And let's get whatever he was working on. Let's get that cleaned up. And I should have took a photo of it. I didn't. But the weirdest thing is he didn't fall, but maybe had an old oak tree that had just fell over his son's privacy fence. And they'd gotten the tree already cut, it looked like, completely back, and started at the end working their way toward the fence. And for some reason, he jumped up on that ladder. And when he cut that largest section, that last big section, it came off and hit and collapsed the ladder and flipped him off. There's 1,000 YouTube videos out there that show that same thing, And but man, the good Lord just was watching after him and just protected him, because that could have been ugly if he'd landed on the saw and all that. So, but yeah, it's that stuff you see on YouTube, man. Some of it's not made up. It's everyday stuff.
There's some ways to ascend with a ladder, but you better be tied in before you do much. I was just thinking, Brian Wagner probably tell you when I was doing a logger program in Covington, Virginia, and we had a safety meeting, and one of the regional vice presidents with the paper company was there, or a lumber company, and he started telling his story where he did that. He had put the ladder up on there. He went out and he cut the tree limb, and the limb went up about 4 inches, and he rode the ladder all the way down.
Oh.
Broke his leg in about 2 places, but it happens more than you think it does.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, I appreciate y'all very much. I want to wish you all good sawing, and if you get a chance, drop back by next Thursday night, and I think we'll have 2 or 3 others next week. Everybody's out working this week, but I appreciate y'all, and we're about to run out of my time schedule here. But hope to be doing this every Thursday night, just passing out some information about chainsaws and operations, and if we can help you in any way, let us know. Thank y'all.
There you go.
Thank you.
See you,
Thanks,
Tim.
Sam.
See you, Keith.
Take care. We'll see you. Good night.
Bye.
All right, guys.